Hi, and welcome to my channel. In today's video, as we talk about the judgment and the love of God, we're going to explore why it's really important to make sure that you have the right standard. Let's go. Hey everybody, it's that Sunday School Girl of thatsundayschoolgirl.com. Welcome to the lesson for Sunday, August 5th. I'm back! Woo, cheers, cheers, applause. I really feel like YouTube should have let me be great today. I needed like music, but you know, with that whole copyright thing, and I don't want to get caught up in that. But I am so thrilled to be back with you. It's actually been a couple of weeks since I've recorded my own video, and so much has happened. But God is so faithful, and I am thrilled to be here. I pray that your week has been blessed. And it's been a long time since I've uploaded on a Friday. So the fact that it is Friday really speaks to what's happened over the last week. The bar exam is over. We now wait until September the 12th when the results come out, and we just continue to pray and we'll see what happens. But since then, I've also had a birthday that produced a surprise trip to Puerto Rico. And most of you know I ended up having to cancel the planned Facebook Live because I was arriving on the beach. And eventually what they told me may happen happened. I had that moment where I just kind of crashed. And the truth is, I think I slept for like 16 hours a couple of days after the bar exam. It was so much energy and adrenaline, and it was kind of just that exhale moment. So I've taken a little bit of time this week to refresh myself just a bit. I finally had to use the words. I don't think I realized it when I stayed very busy, but I was doing a lot and I was really, really tired. So I'm getting back in the swing of things. There was a whole world waiting on me to come and rejoin it. So I'm happy to be back. I feel like I got my life back for my birthday. But now I also look around, and even like some of the boxes and things that I brought back from my apartment when I came back from school are still taped up. So I still need to kind of get settled at home, but it kind of feels like a new day. And part of that is the opportunity to be back and be engaged with this community. As a matter of fact, if you're new around here, welcome. You have just joined the largest cyber community of Sunday school students on the World Wide Web, a growing, learning, loving, supportive community that I could not be more proud of to be connected to, and I am grateful that you're here. I'm going to ask everyone to do me a favor. Make sure that you find the little icon wherever she is of that Sunday School Girl. Make sure that you're subscribed to this channel so that you don't miss content when it's uploaded. If you find your notifications bell, that will ensure that you get emails immediately when there are things uploaded. What is she going to do with all of this newfound free time? She's going to job hunt, but also this gives me space to be more committed to resources for Sunday school training, growth, and development, and making us better together as students, teachers, Christian education leaders, and just other ministry leaders who are looking to improve what we do. I want you to bookmark that sundayschoolgirl.com. Make sure we're in your favorites. There will be new resources and new training that are coming down the pipeline, and you don't want to miss it. I'm getting emails even now that are still inquiring about last year's training, 30 Ways in 30 Days, and it's still available. And for just $1 a day, you can be invested in making your Sunday schools great. And plus, you get to spend 30 days with me. What could be better than that? So check that training out. It is really substantive, and it will be a blessing to your ministry. But there will be other things that are coming down the pipeline again, and you don't want to miss it. Hey, I think that's it. We've got a great lesson to get into, and I don't want to delay. So get your books out. Don't forget that you can download the accompanying notes for this lesson, and let's talk about it together. Our lesson title is God's Righteous, Impartial Judgment. The Bible basis is Romans chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. The Bible truth. Paul teaches that God's kindness, forbearance, and patience lead us to repentance and new life. Our memory verses are verses 10 and 11, and the lesson aim is that we will explore Paul's conviction regarding generous and just lives before God and community. Aspire to refrain from judgmental attitudes that only serve to condemn us, and practice repentance that leads to new life in Christ. We are still talking about justice in the New Testament. Now, you know, as I study these lessons, I'm always really reflective on what they're saying to me and kind of how they resonate with me right where I am. And in recent weeks, I have been really reflective on the community of people that are around me. And in many ways, our community is elective. And we have to be careful about the types of people that we allow around us in different seasons. And as we go through things, or even as we sort through things personally, as we're going through life changes or challenges, who we choose to engage in different points in our lives is really meaningful, really important. I was talking with a friend the other day, and we were sort of saying, well, I have different friends who meet different needs in my life. And so, to be honest, when I feel like, I'm kind of venting and I want someone who says you're right, I know that this is the person who's going to say like, yeah, you're right. And yeah, you deserve to feel that way. And then I have those friends who, when I need real sound wisdom and I need someone to be very level and to sort through things with me, I know who that friend is too. And I have another friend, and I literally will call her when I have something that I'm kind of frustrated about. And I start with the words, "You get to talk me off of the ledge," because I realize again that person is going to bring impartiality and balance and say, hey, have you thought about it this way? Or no, don't say anything yet, kind of think about it, sleep on it. But you need to understand the balance of people in your life, the balance of the community that you place around you. What does that have to do with this week's lesson? It has to do with this community called the Romans, where they didn't have that diversity of thought and diversity of people around them. They were a community where everyone saw only the good in themselves, and they celebrated who they were and what they thought they were and the entitlements that they believed that went along with that, to the point that before long they had become a community of hypocrites. And that's exactly what Paul is addressing in this week's lesson. He has written a letter to the church at Rome, to the Romans. And in this, Paul did his good writing. He's writing to people who are good people. They work really hard to be moral people according to the letter of the law. They were very giving in their time, their talent, their treasure. But they were people who ignored the bigger need that they had, which was about relationship with God. They were satisfied with good just being good enough. And Paul really challenges their thought processes. He challenges their mentality in this writing, because these same people who saw themselves as holy and entitled and privileged by right had turned into a group that was basically unthankful, rebellious, and unrighteous. So despite their goodness, they still needed the gift of salvation. As Paul writes, he is levying both what is a critique and an indictment. It's a really harsh truth, and it highlights that these good people were guilty of bad things. Now, most of you know that I've had a lot of fun looking at sort of the legal elements that I see in these lessons, talking about justice. And as we look at what it takes to be guilty of a criminal act, there is the act plus a guilty mind. And Paul really deals with that. I give you some notes on that in the TSSG notes. But Paul deals with both the acts and their guilty mind. Let's take a look at our lesson in chapter 2. Starting at verse 1, we begin with the word therefore. And therefore is a conclusory word. It means that Paul is now drawing a summary or a conclusion, or he's getting ready to close his preach message. He is telling us now the so what. After you hear a lot of information, we're often guilty of trying to funnel through, so what does this mean to me? And he's been addressing these Jews who totally believe that they were justified by the law. In fact, in chapter 1, he spends the entire chapter talking about the world, the entire world that is guilty before God. And in verses 18 through 32, he talks about God being revealed through creation, which is an intelligent design by an intelligent creator. And as a result, there's a responsibility of creation to the creator. And Paul has basically said that those who have rejected God have put themselves on a dangerous path, because it is a downward spiral. And it always sounds really good when we think that pastor is preaching about someone else or saying something that we believe someone else needs to hear, while dismissing the things that we need to know for ourselves. But here the Romans quickly find out That if they think that all that Paul has laid out has simply been for them to see wrong in others, to lift themselves even more, they could not have been any more wrong, because Paul actually flips the script on them. Whereas he's been talking about the whole world, he now turns and he is pointedly talking to and about the religious community. He is now talking about judging and how they have looked at others and made assessments and made decisions based on their funnel or their purview of what is and what is not appropriate. He's really talking to them about the ability to separate out right from wrong. That's really what judgment is. It's when we decide that we understand the difference between what is right and what is wrong. And here Paul's conclusion is that because you're able to make that separation and yet you live the way you live, you are hypocrites. You're hypocrites because you can see the sin in others, but you only see it in a way that makes what they are doing worse than any shortcomings in your own life. What he's explaining is that if you have the ability to judge others, then you have that same ability to turn the mirror on yourself and see the shortcomings and the inconsistencies in your own life. And God doesn't excuse that. He was going to hold them accountable for the shortcomings in their own lives. As a matter of fact, he uses that word. It is inexcusable. It is without excuse. There is no justification for the way you're seeing the world, the way you're thinking. He's basically highlighting the fact that these people have image issues. What do I mean with image issues? The way they see themselves in the light of others. And they accomplish this through finger pointing. The ability to call out everything wrong in everyone else and make them look bad for their choices without giving consideration to their own. It's recognizing the sin in others while negating the sin in one's own life, because it's easy to make yourself wonderful when the benchmark that you're using is the inconsistency in others. It's interesting because people will often find fault in others that they will justify in themselves. So that person is a liar, but I had to tell a convenient truth, or it was just a small white lie. That person steals, but I just borrowed. So it's very interesting how we somewhat judge ourselves when we create this false benchmark, making it the behavior of others. And it is more or less a deflection mechanism, which attempts to alter the truth of ourselves in a way that flatters us and makes us more wonderful in comparison to others. And that's what he's calling out here. In fact, in Luke 18, you see the epitome of a hypocrite's prayer, where they pray, God, I thank you that I'm not like the other people. I'm not a swindler. I'm not an unjust adulterer. I'm not like the tax gatherer. I fast twice a week. I pay tithes. I do all the right things. I'm not like these people. And that's what this lesson is cautioning us against, is looking to others and deciding I'm better than, or I'm okay because I'm not like that person. It negates the thing that you should be looking at in your own life. When we point out the wrong in others, we in essence turn a mirror back on ourselves, and we cannot be blind to our own faults. And what Paul tells them is that God is not thrown by finger pointing. God does not become distracted about what's going on in our lives as we point to what other people are doing, that they are still accountable to God. Verses 2 and 3, Paul goes on to tell them that somehow these Jews thought through highlighting, again, their wrongdoing, they were distracting what God saw or distracting what God thought about them. And when we can point out sin in others, again, we too put ourselves in a place that we have to be accountable to the things in our lives that are not right. It is unfair. In fact, it's unrealistic to believe that God is somehow judging other people on a different standard. And in this case, again, the fact that they were Jews, that they believed that they were being judged according to some other standard. So even very practically for us today, God doesn't judge us on a different standard because we go to church. He doesn't judge us on a different standard because we teach Sunday school, because we serve in ministry, because we're leaders in our churches. God's standard is our standard, and we have to be mindful of compromise, and we have to be mindful of comparisons that say, I am more, I am better because this other person is less. The Jews saw themselves as people who were God's chosen, and they held themselves to the standard of the law. But Paul argues that even being God's people, they were still guilty. He tells them that God is loving, God is kind, but at the end of the day, God still has expectations. He expects our lives to be lives that are changed and conform to his standard, that conform to his will, that conform in a way that say we identify with him and that we identify with the sufferings of Christ on the cross. Verse 4 is where I say the scales of justice are really thrown down on the table, because these Jews have made the mistake of treating God like the nice guy. And what does that mean? It means that they've misunderstood the purpose of God's goodness. They want to lay everything down on the side of love, and the scales at this point are imbalanced. We've got heavy, heavy, heavy love without the accountability of looking at the justice of God. So here we're needing to see that there is a balance to God. Inside of his love, there is also his justice. And this isn't all about a comfort. It was never intended for them to slip into this place of ease. What Paul is explaining is that God holds back his judgment. He holds it back for a period of time because he does love us. But in that, the expectation is that we're using the time wisely. We're using the time to give attention to our lives, to give attention to the relationship that we have with him. Ultimately, it is God's goal. It is his desire that sinners come to a point of repentance. That is why God gives time, space, and opportunity for people to come into a place, for sinners to come into a place of relationship. 2 Peter 3:9 tells us that it's not God's will that anyone should perish, but he wants us to have that relationship with him. And what Paul is explaining is that they have somehow, again, taken that as God just being a nice guy without understanding or appreciating what that time was really about. He uses the words, they despise it. Now, if we look in our legal criminal context, words that you hear in the law are a depraved heart. That means acting with an indifference toward the risk of something. And here we have the Jews acting with a depraved heart, with an indifference to God, an indifference to the opportunity to have relationship with him, ignoring the risks associated with being separated in relationship to God. They're ignoring the risks of that, ignoring the high risk of harm that can come. That's a legal concept. To sin continually, to sin willfully, is a reckless disregard for the sacrifice of Christ on the cross. And that's what Paul talks about when he says that it is to despise. It's showing contempt for what God offers. And he wants them to know that God is not missing what they are or are not doing. He goes on in verse 5 and he says that God has been gracious with his timing, but it's not going to be unfair when he levies judgment. He's been gracious, but he is a God of judgment. And you don't just get to get away with things for an indefinite period of time. That judgment is sure and it's coming. We watch children sometimes, and to be honest, we do it as adults. We take a little space and we see, okay, we got away with that. And next time you do that and you take it an inch further, and then you find out that you've gotten out there too far or into something that you didn't mean to be into because you were taking liberties without thinking about the consequences. But again, Paul assures them that judgment is coming. Verses 6 through 8 is how I think I took the next sections. Paul is writing so boldly. Remember, this is the man who said that I am not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ, for it is power, is the salvation of God unto everyone that believes. And he is writing very boldly here as he continues to explain. In verses 6 through 8, he basically tells us that there is a contract that is being formed here. There's a contract. Here's another legal thing that I see in here. There's a contract. What kind of contract is there? This is a unilateral contract. It means that one side is offering something and the other side responds through its performance. The only way you can accept this contract or this offer is by performance. A promise is made, and he's talking about the promises, and there are really two options on the table. He says that you're going to get what's coming to you, and your performance is invited by what's offered. There are really two offers here. The first one is that the offer is to give glory, honor, peace, eternal life in the presence of God. But the return performance for that promise is working on God's side. It's about how we live every day. It's receiving Christ and living a life for God. Offer number two, option two, is fiery. It's God's wrath. It's tribulation. It's judgment. It's anguish. And the performance that you'll return for that is living the way you want to live and doing things your own way. In essence, it is by performing in a way that rejects Christ. These are the options that are on the table. He's explaining that hypocrites are going to be judged just like heathens. And in their minds, they were very quick to call out heathens and the ways of heathens and to know what heathens deserve. And here's Paul saying that you as hypocrites will deserve the same treatment and get the same judgment as the heathens. Performance isn't anything that can be accomplished in and of our own. It can only be accomplished through the acceptance of Jesus Christ and the appreciation of his sacrifice on the cross. Verses 9 through 11, the Jews took a lot of credit again for who they were, their pedigree, the lineage through which they had come. And Paul argues that none of this matters. And we have to watch this even today. Even in our church settings, there are persons who are from certain church pedigree or certain names. In my church, I represent the 5th generation of ministry leaders in my family serving in my church. But what Paul says is that doesn't matter. Like, you can't ride that forever. You have to have your own relationship and your own experience. And you won't just be bound for heaven because you have the right name, the right last name, because you have the right position. That itself does not make you heaven bound, but the benefits and the payoff come from the embracing of a responsible life in Christ Jesus. And he's explaining that God judges according not to how you were born, but by the way we've lived our lives. In the criminal system, there are penalty phases. And as you look at penalty, there's always a range of penalty for a crime. And there's always a maximum penalty. And as we look at the maximum penalty here is death. But as we talk again about balancing the love and the justice of God, we understand that God has already absorbed the maximum penalty, meaning where we deserve death. He sent his son and he took that maximum penalty for us in the giving of his life. And so now, because he's accepted that maximum penalty, here when we're judged according to our deeds, we know again that none of us could pay that price. But God gives us the opportunity to receive salvation by accepting that the penalty has already been paid for us. But there has to be in any offer, any contract, there is no contract if there's not acceptance. And again, our acceptance in a unilateral contract is by our performance. It's the way in which we live our lives every day. Paul, as he continues to write, does talk about a hope. This is not all a letter of gloom and doom, but he's really trying to build a case around the hope that we have as it relates to those of us who have accepted the relationship and the love of Jesus Christ. Here are my key learnings from this week. First, there are those who are self-righteous, and that's a dangerous place. It's a slippery slope because it negates your own guilt to point out the wrong in others. Again, it is so easy to call out sin in others, but this lesson really calls for us to get out a mirror and turn the light on ourselves and to really look at the choices that we make, the environment that's around us, and to ensure that our relationship is solid and that we're performing in ways that bring glory and honor to God. Secondly, we cannot take for granted the space that God allows us to get things right. Again, my grandfather used to talk about that. He said he's giving you another chance to get it right. And every day that God gives us is the opportunity for us to get it right, to get our relationship right, to get our way of living right. The truth is, we may fool other people. We can fool them with our exterior. We talk a lot about the mask and taking off the mask. You may fool other people, but we never fool God. And we've got to be careful about living our lives in a way that is dishonest, living a lie. But we have to be honest about who we are and not take for granted the opportunity every day that God gives us to get it right. We sometimes hear that he's a God of a second chance, and that's true, but it's not totally the end of the answer. God is a God of many chances. And so many of us have used those chances time and time again. But we have to realize that God is not without recourse. He gives us opportunity because he does love us. But there is a side of him that requires justice and judgment. He doesn't want a relationship with us that is forced or coerced out of fear, but he wants a relationship that has been developed. If you think about our relationships in the natural, we don't want relationships out of duress. We want those relationships where we have had the opportunity to build and to get to know the person and to appreciate that person. And that's exactly what God wants from and with us. Everyone needs someone that they can hear from. And I started this lesson in that way, that you've got to watch who is around you. Watch who you're building community with. Watch who you're getting comfortable with. Be careful about who you take your advice from. Watch those who are always co-signing and celebrating everything that you do. Everyone needs honest friends. Make sure there's someone in your circle who will tell you, you didn't get that right. You didn't handle that right. I may have thought about doing that a different way. Or did you realize that maybe you didn't come across the right way when you did or said? You need those honest people in your life so that you don't slide off, so that I don't slide off into ways that are self-absorbed and allow me to become and allow you to become hypocritical in the ways that we live. Watch your benchmarks. What are benchmarks? Benchmarks are those things that we call the standard. Watch that our standard doesn't simply become, I am good because I'm better than another person. I am good because I don't do these things. I am good because I don't participate in those big sins that the church likes to identify. I don't drink, I don't curse, I don't have illicit sex. Whatever those big things are, you've got to be careful not to make your evaluation of self simply in the light of the other things that people are doing or the choices that they make. But our benchmark, our standard is the word of God. Our standard is God's standard. And Paul more or less highlights that. The fact that these Romans have been negligent. There's another criminal term, but they have been negligent because they had a duty to God. He lays that out in chapter 1. All of creation, because we have this excellent creator, we have a duty to God, and we have a duty to live in a way that brings glory and honor to him. How do we do that? We do that by exercising proper care in our lives and maintaining the standard of relationship with him. That's a negligent standard that you have to maintain or exercise proper care for someone in a like position who would be doing like things. And what does that mean? That we're expected to behave in ways that similarly situated people, that's some legal stuff, similarly situated people would behave. Who are similarly situated people? They are people just like you and people like me, who in and of ourselves could not have made the sacrifice that Jesus Christ made on the cross. We are expected to behave in ways of people who are grateful for that sacrifice that was made, grateful and understanding that we could not give forgiveness to ourselves. And as a result of our gratitude, the lives that we live, if you think about our system, when you go into court, there's always a jury. And the jury's job is to evaluate the weight of evidence. And the evidence is presented through testimony, through witnesses. And the testimony that we give, the jury decides how truthful they believe someone's testimony is. And the jury for us is the people that we see every day, the people that we come in contact with, the people that we live, work, and serve with. And what are they evaluating? They're evaluating the truthfulness of the testimony in our lives, the way that we live every single day. When our feet meet the street. The jury decides, the world decides the weight of that evidence. They decided through what they see in us. And ultimately, when we are submitted to Christ, the goal is that what they see in us is salt and light in the earth. And it means that we are difference makers. We are game changers where we are, not out of fear, but out of the relationship and the love that we have and the love that we've experienced through a God who makes sacrifice for us and who desires more than anything to have relationship with us and for us to be our best, represent our best, and do our best every single day of our lives. This is our lesson for this week. I pray that it has been a blessing to you. I want you to go out and have a wonderful weekend. Make sure that Sunday school is on your list of things to do. Enjoy every moment of it. I will see you in Sunday school. Bye, everybody.